Hello, everybody, and welcome back to You Are Good Enough. This is your host, Kimberley Bell. And today I have the honor of having my awesome assistant, Pamela, join me on this podcast today. I really created this podcast because I knew that we were leaving a foundation of fear and we were moving more into a foundation of love. And part of the foundation of love is being empowered in our lives in all ways. Mentally, physically, spiritually, etherically. And today we're talking about the physical. And this is something that many people might be able to identify with. So oftentimes when we embark, I believe, this is my opinion from what I've seen, when we go into an area of an awakening, if you will, right? Where we become more conscious of what's happening in our lives, we also start to notice that we might go through a health crisis, which is really a physical transformation. And what we're doing is we're letting go, and our body is helping us navigate, giving us clues of where to go, to let go of what is no longer serving us. So, this is partially just my belief system, but this is what I have seen, and I've experienced it for not only myself, I've experienced it for my daughter, and I've watched a few friends go through it as well. And Pamela and I, this is a very last minute idea here. Pamela and I were literally having a conversation like 2 weeks ago, and she was telling me her story. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. This is crazy. I feel like I want to share this with the public. I want to share it with our listeners, because every time we have issues and we can tap into tools, right, perspectives and empowering ways of getting through our experiences, they just make us stronger on the other end. So we're going to dive into this. And I was talking with Pamela, and she was sharing with me that a few years ago, and she can tell you the particulars, but a few years ago, she was really starting to experience some symptoms. So anyway, I want to say welcome, Pamela.
Thank you very much.
I'm so psyched. Thank you. And I'm so psyched to have you here. So I want to get right into it. And if you could just, let's talk about it again. We haven't talked about it a whole lot, so this is going to feel brand new all over again. So I guess, can you take us back to what was getting your attention? How long ago was this? What was getting your attention? What were your symptoms? What was going on in your life?
Well, it's interesting. They always say hindsight is 20/20, and in this case, that's very true. A lot of the early symptoms I was having, I didn't necessarily recognize them as anything out of the normal. At first I associated a lot of it, which I think a lot of people do, with, oh, I'm getting older. I just need to take better care of myself. It's just normal things, but of course, in the end, it wasn't normal things. We'll get into that in just a minute. But, in the very beginning, it was more like lower energy, joint pain, brain fog. And I started noticing more and more I was having more food intolerance, more sensitivities and things like that. So that's really all it was in the very beginning. I say that's all it was, but of course that's not good. But again, I feel like it's something that a lot of people just associate with, oh, this is just how life is, right? But it's not. It doesn't have to be.
Totally agree. And you know what? The symptoms that you described are symptoms that I have heard so many people describe that they're experiencing as well. That just goes to show you, though, how common these symptoms are. Mm-hmm. So tell me this. What did you do? How long did you go along with the symptoms before you realized, you know what, this is crazy? Something's going on.
It was probably over a couple of year period where things continue to ramp up and ramp up and ramp up. As far as the food intolerance, first it was shellfish, and then it was lactose intolerance, and then it was onions. And each one of those things started out as a little irritation, and just over that 2 to 3 year period just got worse and worse significantly, to the point, that I couldn't have them at all. And then towards the end of that period, it was even starting to affect me, certain spices, garlic. There were just a lot of things that are in almost everything, you
Right.
know. Um, I also had ventured into, I started to have some skin issues, and that also began to ramp up more and more. And it turned out to be, after not being able to get it diagnosed forever, I was finally told that it was an autoimmune version of eczema.
Okay.
Um, so then that was the next, I guess, I don't benchmark.
Right.
um, then I would say from there, we tried and tried and tried to treat it, but it's autoimmune. And so there wasn't a whole lot we could do other than to treat the symptoms of it. Then within 6 months, I guess, 6 to 7 months after that, I started having additional skin problems. And this was, it was diagnosed as another autoimmune, which is hidradenitis suppurativa. Say that 5 times fast.
I never heard of that.
It's definitely not fun. It's horrible. It's
Oh,
just nutshell version is it causes skin irritation, infection, boils, bumps.
oh,
Like, it's horrible. So yeah.
wow. That is so nasty. Okay. So thinking out loud here. The first doctor you went to, was this an allergist? And then did you get bounced to dermatology? Because, the way that medicine typically works, or mainstream medicine, right? Um, they're different departments, and so they don't typically cross over. It's not a holistic approach. It's a very independent approach. It
Hmm.
seems that was my experience. That's been our experience.
Hmm.
Was that yours as well?
It was. I started
Okay.
out with, of course, my primary care, and
Yeah.
then ended up at a dermatologist who misdiagnosed me, by the
Yeah.
way, a couple of
Okay.
different times.
Okay.
And then
Yeah.
from there, I ended up going to it was actually a very specialized dermatologist, who was finally the one that decided to do a biopsy to figure out what was going on. And at that point in time, I was finally diagnosed with these two different autoimmune issues. Um, and then I'll call it HS for short. The
Okay.
HS ended up, at first, it was just obviously very inconvenient and very painful and very frustrating.
Mm.
But then, on one particular occasion, when it blew up, it was really bad. And the infection became even worse than normal. And it ended up turning into staph slash MRSA, which put me in the
Oh,
hospital.
wow.
Um,
Okay.
yes, yes, it was bad. And as a result of that, because it got so bad so quickly and ramped up so quickly, I ended up being in the hospital for almost a month. I had multiple surgeries, almost lost my arm from it. Um,
Whoa.
yeah. And then, of course, being in the hospital, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful that I was able to keep my arm, and that, I
Thank
was able
God.
to overcome all of that. But the way that that happened was through very, very strong antibiotics,
Hmm.
which you can imagine destroyed my gut flora,
Right.
destroyed my health,
Right.
and actually exacerbated most of the problems I was already having before all of this came about. So by the time I got home from the hospital, while I was very grateful, I was also, I feel, in the poorest health I have ever been in, because of all the combination of what was already going on, plus the heavy antibiotics, IV antibiotics, no less. Um, so, yes.
That's crazy. And wow, there's so much going through my head right now. I've heard about people being in the hospital with MRSA, right? But this is just a condition that really just progressed over time, being part of the autoimmune family, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then you're dealing with this on a regular basis, and it's nasty to begin with. And then all of a sudden it turns into this like really serious stuff. How long, what was the period of time, would you say, in the escalation between, is it HS? Is that what we're calling it for short? The really awful boil, oozing, sore type stuff. How long was the period of time, I'm just curious, between when you realized you had that, you got the diagnosis that you had that, and then it actually turned into the staph and MRSA?
Let me think. I'd say it wasn't that long, actually. It was probably only a 6-month period at most.
Okay. And so, I mean, that's still it's kind of long and short, I guess. When you're going through it, it feels like forever, because how depressing is this? Number one, to have any skin issues is really depressing. And you can start to feel, I know from experiences that I've had with my daughter, she went through a skin biopsy at a very young age. And I know that she went through a lot of things that made her feel like a guinea pig, and sometimes we can feel like when we go to the doctor, we might have a sense that they don't quite know. So they're trying things, right? Did you have that same experience?
Definitely, I did. Yes. It felt like less of a diagnosis and more of a best guess, Let's try this. I think this is what it is. So let's try this and see if it'll work. That was definitely my experience. Yes.
What I think happens is, and, look, we've seen some crazy stuff, and a lot of doctors would probably agree that they've seen a lot of crazy stuff. And I know that with my experience with my child, I kept saying, because they also, I just want to back it up, they also said autoimmune for her, right? They also said autoimmune for me. And autoimmune is many things, right? Autoimmune can be anything from thyroid, which is a big deal, even though it's so commonplace right now. I don't want to minimize that. It can be from thyroid all the way to these just really, horrific things. For example, I've had a lupus diagnosis before, and at the end of the day, what my gut was telling me about my child was that it was the foundational health of her immune system, right? And obviously, it took us years to figure out the autoimmune piece. Like you went through a period of time before they were calling it this. Oh, ironically, now you have another autoimmune issue with the skin. And, the issue is if you don't put the fire out, right, then it's going to look like you said earlier, it started out as a few food, insensitivities or sensitivities. And then it just blew up into bigger stuff. So here's a question. You get home from the hospital, you're grateful to have your arm, and you're grateful that you made it through your time. And let's face it, when they keep you in the hospital for a month, something's really going on. Okay. Because they're looking to drop you out of the hospital as quick as possible.
Right.
So did you fear for your life before I go to my next question? Like, were you?
Somewhat at first, I think it was very overwhelming. But within a short period of time of being there, they reassured me, we have this under control. It's going to take several surgeries to go in and remove tissue that is no longer viable and all of that. But we can do this. It's going to be okay. And then after about the first week and a half, once they had enough data to see that the antibiotics were reversing it, and getting rid of it, that made a big difference too for my mental stability, basically, that, okay, this, it's going to be okay now. It's going to be okay. I just have to make it through. But it was a total of 7 surgeries that I had over that 4-week period.
So may I ask, and if it's too personal, of course, we're not going to talk about it, but may I ask, were the surgeries only on the arm? Was it around the MRSA? Were they trying to remove this?
Yes. Yes, they were removing the tissue and that, I guess, what do they call it? Necrotic tissue or whatever.
Yep.
So, yes.
Okay. So when you got home from the hospital, right? And you realized you weren't feeling as good as you thought you might, maybe you were supposed to, or you should feel after being released from the hospital. What was the next step? I mean, what did you go through? What, yeah.
Well, it's funny. You can't tell it by the way we were living our lives before all this happened, but my husband and I both have always felt very strongly about food being medicine, and
Mm.
we knew it and we believed it, but we weren't necessarily practicing it. And so after this ordeal, we thought, we need to look to food, nutrition, natural plant-based something to
Mm-hmm.
help. We never really imagined that it would do all that it did, which I know we're getting ready to get into, but we were just looking at it for a little relief. Maybe if we change our eating a little bit, maybe it'll give some relief, and maybe we can do some other things to work on some of these things that I'm going through. Right.
Yeah.
So we both started doing research. One book my husband was reading at the time was called Toxic Relief.
Okay.
And it's basically it's a really good book. It talks all about all different types of diseases and ailments and issues, and what a lot of natural cures are for those things by taking in specific vitamins or changing your diet in certain ways. And as he was reading it, he came across a section that was talking about Candida overgrowth. And he stopped and he read it 2 or 3 times, and he brought it to me and he said, "This is a checklist of you. This is read this. This is exactly the things that you've been experiencing." And in some of the cases, it listed things that weren't exactly what were happening to me, but very similar.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things it listed, for instance, was psoriasis, which is different, but it's also a skin disorder.
Mm-hmm.
It listed Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune disease. I didn't have that, but I was, struggling with autoimmune issues.
Correct.
So there were so many similarities. And that was kind of what set in motion all of the things after that. My husband will tell you I don't do anything halfway. So when I found this out, research, books, internet, I absorbed everything I possibly could about this overgrowth issue, and was it real, and what does it mean. And I can't even tell you all the names of the books I read.
Yeah.
I did find one in particular that I liked after absorbing lots of information.
Uh-huh.
Just because it's very simple. It really speaks to, here's the deal, here's the foods you need to avoid, here's the foods you should eat, and
Yep.
here's a cleanse that you can do. Very basic. So
What's
it's called
that?
the Candida Cleanse Natural Cure is
Okay,
what
I've
it's
heard of that.
called. And basically I read it front to back and read it over and over and developed my own plan. And we did some massive overhaul shopping,
Yeah.
got rid of a lot of things, and started the 3-week cleanse. And I can't even tell you the difference that it made for me.
Okay, so explain that. So you did it was a 3-week cleanse,
Yes.
and yeah, tell us. I mean, like, when did obviously you noticed there were some changes that were happening for you. When did you notice upon, beginning this process, when did you actually notice that something's different? Something's changed?
Okay. First, I will say that almost everything I've ever read about doing this cleanse, they
Yep.
do warn you, especially if you've been eating in a very unhealthy way, that when you embark on any kind of detoxification cleanse like
Yep.
this,
Yep.
the first week, you're probably going to feel like you have the flu. It's not going to be good
Yeah. Yes.
because your body is
Not
basically
used to
ridding
it.
itself, right, of all of that yuck that's in your system. So that was my experience the first week of the cleanse.
Okay. I'm really, let me just stop you for a minute. So that's a wonderful thing that you just said. Okay. And of course, we're not treating and we're not diagnosing. We're having a conversation right now about your experience and your journey. But I did have a question. I think it might be good information to understand how you ate before, because here's the deal. Everybody has their own definition of healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For example, there are associations, the American Heart Association or some of these other associations, and you look at what they recommend for eating, and that some of it's quite confusing as to how they came up with a list when people are going through these certain things, right? So what was your diet like before, so that we can understand a before diet and after diet, because this will help people identify with themselves in their own life.
Right. I would say before the cleanse, just being perfectly honest, we probably ate out once or twice a week, just based on busy life, right? Schedules are crazy and whatever. So that was part of the problem. But even when we cooked at home, we felt like we were eating sort of healthy because we were trying to eat as little beef as possible.
There's
we
one
were trying to eat brown rice, instead of white rice. We were trying to fry foods as little as possible and eat more, grilled. We were still eating a ton of potatoes and pastas and a lot of the starchy, carby foods that are out there. Sweets, we didn't eat huge amounts, but we were still doing a lot of that, So I don't know if you feel like that answers your question well. I mean, I feel like we eat fruits, we eat vegetables, we ate, I feel like what everybody eats, but a lot of it has to do with how you prepare those things, or how much of those things you eat, or what you eat them in conjunction with, and that kind of thing.
Totally agree. Now, when you guys used to eat out, were you going to like restaurants, or were you doing, more fast food? Was it like, what kind of outside of the home choices were you making?
I'd say it was about 50-50 between popular restaurants, seafood restaurants, and I wish I could, Italian restaurants.
We don't have to
things like that. But then the other half was just your run of the mill fast food, burgers, fries, things like that.
All the chains that we're so familiar with. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Now, when you began the cleanse, you embarked on this process. How long before you actually noticed, you felt horrific the first week, you felt like you had the flu? I've had that experience too. But after that, take us from the time when you started to feel better, maybe.
Okay. So after, I'd say the flu-like symptoms lasted for about a week to 10 days. And then as I started coming out of that, it was amazing, the difference in the energy that I had already, how I felt when I first woke up in the morning, even. I didn't have that feeling that you have a lot of times when you first wake up and you're just groggy and you just don't want to get up and go. My joint pain seemed to be less. A lot of the symptoms that I was associating with kind of pre-arthritis, I guess you'd say, those started to disappear. It was amazing. But even outwardly, my husband could tell. He said, your skin is just radiant and glowing. It looks like I'm looking at a filter on Instagram, but it's really you standing here. It's just amazing. And my hair got healthier and started growing more and just got fuller and more body. My nails started going crazy. My skin, everything, just my eyes were brighter, and it was, and I could see it too, but it was pretty amazing. And then that progressed throughout the rest of the 3 weeks of the cleanse. So, yes.
And I just want to say that I can tell you're continuing all of this because you have beautiful skin and hair all the way.
Thank you.
So, definitely the picture of health. Okay. So after the 3-week period, and you said you were like, oh my gosh, did you feel reborn? Like I'm renewed, know? Right?
Yes, I really did. It was amazing. I felt like what do people say, new lease on life or something,
Yeah, new lease on life. That. Oh yeah, in a very big way, because if you look at that after you crossed over your 3 weeks, looking back at what had just transpired a few months ago, you
Mm-hmm.
were probably like, I thought I was going to lose my arm, right?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
a very different life experience.
Yes.
And how much gratitude. I can't even imagine the amount of gratitude that you had in your heart for this whole
Oh,
experience, right?
yes. It was amazing. It was huge. I was very thankful, very
Yeah.
grateful.
It's truly amazing. It
Yes,
really is.
it really is. It's to go from such an extreme to literally the other extreme in such a short period of time is just, it's overwhelming. You just felt, I can't even put it to words, honestly.
And I want people listening right now, if you have a situation going on and you're going through what you feel might be your own health crisis, try not to fall that far into despair, because my experiences, and now Pamela, you're sharing your own experience. My experiences, once you find the issue, right? Or you didn't even quite know exactly what the issue was, but you saw symptoms. They were very similar to what you're dealing with. They all go to the immune system, right? This is the common
Mhm,
denominator here.
mhm.
And you made a few changes, but the results were so dramatic in such a short period of time. So I want people to realize, you know what? You're probably listening to this for a reason, for sure.
Mhm.
Can you just tell the audience here about what was involved in the cleanse? Like just, just like the basics. We hear so much about cleansing and this cleanse and that cleanse. And what was yours?
Basically,
Yeah.
it was a plant-based cleanse, and it changed, for me. I'm not gonna say that I followed verbatim what was in the book that I read. There's so
Okay.
many different versions, but for me, the first week, it basically tells you to eliminate everything that's sugar, starch, gluten, yeast, oils, dairy, sauces. I mean, almost everything.
Right.
And so the first week, it was only plants, vegetables. That's it.
Okay. So
Um,
it's only plants. Okay. So no,
right,
because a misnomer I feel is soy, right? Soy is something that a lot of people have reaction to. And
mhm,
from what I understand, it's heavily genetically modified, right?
mhm,
And not everybody, well, I don't think anyone really tolerates well GMOs, but we might not
right,
realize it, right? Because we do so many things in our, just in our lifestyle that might not be in the best of our health.
right.
But so you're saying that you did, so was it like a vegetable juice cleanse, steamed vegetables?
I
Like,
did mainly vegetables, salads, but really no dressing.
yep, yep,
Just the raw veggies.
yep,
And I was also allowed to I could steam the vegetables and eat
yep.
them cooked,
Hmm.
but I couldn't use any oils or butters or anything like that. So it was a very bland week, I can tell you that. It was very
Okay.
bland, especially coming from how I had been eating before.
Yes.
It was very hard, but
That's a big
very worth it though.
Okay.
Week 2,
Yep.
I was able to introduce a few fruits, which allowed, of course, fruits have sugars,
Yes.
but they're natural sugars. And so they had to be in small quantities. And
Mhm.
so it wasn't a daily staple or something I had it every time I ate, but it was maybe once a day. I'd let myself have half of a banana or a few slices of apple or a little bit of juice or something like that.
Mhm, mhm.
And when I say juice, I mean natural juice, not store bought OJ.
Yeah, it's a very big difference. Very
Yes,
big difference.
yes.
Okay, and what was the
And
third week?
the 3rd week was basically that same scenario, but I was able to introduce very small amounts of grains. I could have just a maybe 2 tablespoons of brown rice for padding with some of the foods that I was eating, things like that. That's
Interesting.
basically it.
Okay, so after the third week period, what did you do then?
I would say for about 6 months after that, I continued to eat. I started introducing slowly back into my diet some of the
Okay.
things that are pretty much necessary just to eat like a normal person, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you can like
Yeah.
completely avoid all these things all the time. So I just slowly introduced things back, but I started looking before I introduced them back into healthier versions of those things, healthier ways of having those things instead of bringing bread back into the mix,
Hmm.
but it being white enriched bread. I started looking at alternatives to that and things that have less sugar in them, because that is one of the primary things. The yeast and the sugar are the two things, if it is related to candida, that cause candida to go nuts.
Good.
So
Yeah.
I started looking for that, not enriched bread, not processed bread, but something that's
Hmm.
whole wheat based, not just wheat, not honey wheat, but whole
Yeah.
wheat, things like that. And definitely avoided white rice pasta. I continued to do that for a long time, because it's just, again, anything that turns into sugar once it gets in your system,
That's it.
same thing, right? It,
Yeah.
it just ramps up the candida. So I continued to do that for weeks and weeks, really for months afterwards. And I ended up, I'm trying to remember back then, I think I lost like 37 pounds at that time.
Wow.
And it was very slow. I lost it
Yeah.
pretty slowly.
That's the best way.
um, and then, just being honest,
Yep.
eventually
Yep.
my husband and I started easing back into old
Sugar.
ways, old ways, old
Yeah.
ways. Yes. And it's so easy to do because
It
at first
is.
you think, I'm just going to do it this one time. It's the
Right.
holiday, it's my birthday, it's whatever. But then it ends up becoming the norm again.
Uh-huh.
And I won't say that everything automatically came back as just as bad as it was before, but
Right.
over time, it slowly started creeping back in. And
Yeah.
thankfully,
Yeah.
before we allowed it to get to the level that it was
Right.
originally, we both were like, you know what? No, we're not doing this again.
Yeah.
And so about a year ago, we got back eating that way again. Very plant based, very little meats, never beef, never pork, only fish for the most part,
Yeah.
things like that. And so getting back onto it again since a year ago, I've seen a 40-pound weight loss to this point.
Wow.
And as a result of all of these changes, I am no longer allergic to shrimp, any shellfish, onions. I'm not lactose intolerant anymore. And even my seasonal allergies are minimal at this point compared to
Wow.
what they were before. Yes. So it was amazing for me.
Your body had and was carrying such a burden that
Mhm.
got completely out of control, like a wildfire, right?
Yes. Yes.
And that's
Very
the
much.
way I look at Candida. Um, and look at what you were able to do. Like, we don't understand our organs and what they're seriously trying to do. Like, our bodies, they are a temple. And
Mhm.
our bodies weren't made for a lot of these artificial things to come in. I mean, if we think about it, we go all the way back to the beginning of time, whatever our ideas are, one thing is for sure is that we feel like we lived a more natural life, right?
Mhm.
More natural and wholesome life where there weren't the additives put into things, even if they may have been like a cake, a box of cake mix or something like that, right? I remember my grandmother using coconut oil, right, to
Mhm.
make her coconut cakes and things of this nature. And we have discovered through this time there are a lot of healthy fats, right? Fats are not a bad thing, right? Fats can really help with our cognitive function, and
Mhm.
they just help in so many areas. I'm a high fat eater, but I eat, really healthy fats.
Mhm.
But not to get into that, what I wanted to say was this candida thing, because my daughter too really suffered from candida. And you said an amazing thing that's true. If you're, you know, what you discovered was anything that broke down to sugar basically was fueling a fire that was in within you and you didn't know it. Now,
Right.
there are a lot of people who drink an awful lot, and guess what? They probably, I would go out on a limb and say chances are real high they have candida. But do they
Mhm.
know it? No. I had candida also. I was eating a lot of sugar. I was addicted to sugar for many
Mhm.
years. And you can relate to that, I'm sure. It's like
Yes.
you crave it all the time.
Yes.
And And especially around our cycles for the women in the group here, there really is something to that hormonally. Maybe it has a lot to do with energy, right? Because when we feel low energy, our body's like, hey, eat something sugary to get you back, but then that turns into a vicious cycle.
Yes, it does.
I just wanted to bring our attention to the fact that your experience, my experience, so many people's experiences are about the foundation of the immune system that has become, I would damaged, unhealthy, broken down, right? But guess what? We can actually turn that around. That is what was going on with my daughter also at 6 years old. And I kept saying to these Harvard trained doctors, just fix her immune system. This is what the problem is. I can tell you, she's having allergies out the yin yang. Like, is anyone looking? I was bounced from so many departments, I can't even tell you. And nobody was really talking and communicating with each other. So our experience also was, and it took me 7 years, almost 7 years, I think year 5.5, I stumbled upon a doctor in the Midwest who was doing this testing. And what we discovered, I discovered a lot of things. Her body was just overloaded, right? And you can't understand what's happening when the body's so overloaded. As you explained, you become allergic to everything. That too was her experience. And what I realized was her Candida was showing itself through her skin also, with oozing, with these things. Wasn't to your degree. It was different. She was inflamed, swelling, lots of edema, lots of oozing, like an extreme version of eczema at the worst. Like you've seen awful pictures, same type of thing. And you experienced a lot of that stuff. Stuff's trying to get out of her system too. That's the other thing, because that's the way the body, that's one detox route, right? Is through the skin. Yes. So, if someone's listening here and they're not feeling good, go find information about how to help yourself with your immune system, because all autoimmune disease can be helped in a very big way, if not cured, by actually, fixing your immune system. And there are so many doctors now in this day and age, there are so many doctors. We've talked about a couple of great books here that I know we're going to put in the notes for people to take a look at, but I just want to bring them up again. So one book that you mentioned was Toxic Relief. Do we know the author on that by chance?
It is Don Colbert, MD, is the name of the doctor. And I will say that the book is it's very biblically based.
Okay.
His instructions and his, basically his belief system.
Right.
The information is amazing though. It's really amazing.
Truly valuable, and was for your life, basically. Yes. And the health of your body. Also the Candida cleanse, is that it?
Candida cleanse natural cure.
Natural cure. Okay. And do we know the author on that one?
Pamela Clark.
Pamela Clark. Okay. Another Pamela. Cool. And there are a plethora of doctors in this day and age who are a lot more knowledgeable now. We've got our lots of alternative doctors out there. They're all about healing. It's a holistic approach. We've got a lot of, functional medical doctors. There are just so many ways to heal. And I've experienced a lot of healing modalities myself personally. And I always like to say there's more than one way to skin a cat. I know that we've been going here a little bit, but I'm curious to know, before we step away from this, what was it, looking back, while you were, eating what you thought normally was, growing up and all this kind of stuff, was there an emotional component that you've noticed, right? Looking at you, the way you feel empowered in your life now, realizing you had the power to heal yourself. This is what I also really want people to understand. You have the power to heal yourself. We all came, I believe, We all came with this power to heal ourselves. And I discovered it through healing my daughter, right? I discovered it through doing that for myself. And you discovered it also, Pamela, and through the journey that you went on, and you listened to yourself. I like to bring up the emotional component because I was told many years ago, I didn't want to hear it at the time, that there's an emotional component to many of the ailments and the dysfunctions that we experience in the physical body. And not only, I want to say, there's an emotional, there's a physical, and there's the spiritual body as well, which I feel is as important, if not the most important in a lot of ways. It can really help us heal. Mm-hmm. But any insight there? Anything you want to share, like emotionally, like what you may have been? Was there something you were holding on in your life? Did you have any realization like that?
I feel like I can't point to any one particular thing, but I can say that they definitely go hand in hand. It's very clear to me. My mindset then versus now is so different. And back then, I feel like I let myself very easily get overwhelmed by things. I took everything personal. Everything was, it was not a suggestion. It was a criticism. That was kind of my mindset back then. It was a very negative mindset. And now sitting where I am and having gone through what I've been through, my outlook has definitely changed. And I know that plays a part into my better health, not just the eating differently, but my perspective on life and the way that I see things. And everything's not meant to be personal. And suggestion is a suggestion. It's not a criticism, and it's not a personal attack. And I think that has played a big role, and they play off of one another, because the more positive outlook and perspective that I have helps me eat better and want to do better things for myself. And then eating better and eating more healthy makes me feel better, and it gives me more confidence, and which of course gives me a better emotional side as well. So
right.
they definitely all play together. And all of that combined with the spiritual growth that I've experienced over the last several years too, in awakening in a lot of ways, mm-hmm. It's very different than it was back then, and it definitely plays a huge role. I will say that.
That's so cool. Thank you, and I love hearing that, because this is what I hear from people over and over again, and it's almost like we have to have, in some ways, as human beings, I guess I keep learning over and over again that we have to have these shake up, wake up kind of moments, so that we step into our power and we learn that we're really here to advocate for self. Mm-hmm. And nobody will ever be able to advocate on our behalf the same way that we're meant to be able to do for ourselves, right? Yes. You could have the most amazing partner in the world, the most amazing parent in the world, but at the end of the day, what my daughter and I both found, even for herself, is things really started to change when I started including her in the conversation. How do you feel with that doctor? Right? How do you feel? And that empowers people. You know what I mean? And you learned that you can advocate. And now look how confident you are. And now you have a different kind of intelligence also that you're tapping into, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah, that's huge. What is something that you would like to offer someone who's listening that might not be feeling well at this time? Is there words of wisdom that you'd like to share, or, like you're having a conversation with them, friend to friend? What is it that you might say to somebody who is struggling within themselves?
I would say that, especially in this day and age when we have access to so much information, whether it's through books or the internet or, podcasts or whatever, do some research, figure it out, try your best to figure it out, because I find even today, so many people still rely on their doctor to tell them what's wrong. And they don't believe that anything outside of what that doctor says is valid. And there's so much information And all it takes is a few minutes, really, of your time. Do some research, put some feelers out, look around, and look for your symptoms. Even if you don't know, okay, this is wrong with me, research some of your symptoms and look for common threads and figure out some natural ways that you can do better by yourself, because it's available. And it's especially available if your mindset is I can do this, I will find this. I mean, Kimberly, I don't have to tell you.
I do. No, but you're right. And that's powerful because, look, we're afraid, right? You remember how afraid you were when you're in the hospital? You thought you might lose your arm, all right?
Mm-hmm.
We're terrified. So sometimes it's about we don't often know, right? So when we have a lot going on in our minds and we know we don't feel well, and somebody might be hearing what you're saying, yeah, that's true. If the person isn't able to be quiet enough to actually research without the fear coming in, like, oh my God, could that be happening? Oh my God. This isn't about going down a slippery slope, right? This is about listening to yourself when you look at symptoms, right? Or you get clear on your symptoms. It's also a situation where you can even take your stuff and go to your doctor and say, here, what do you think about this, right? But I think you brought up another good point too, because we were programmed from the very beginning of time to believe more in what the doctor thinks about our health without considering ourselves in the equation. And like so much of life, we've been programmed to give our power to things outside of us. So here again, we see this in this, in medicine, right? Doctor, patient. And now we've got a lot of amazing doctors who are open-minded, and they realize that, you know what, I might not know better than my patient, right? And this is more of a conversation. So I want to also offer to somebody, if you feel like you're not getting the answers, you might not feel like you're heard or acknowledged or empowered. You know what? It's probably time to make a change, right? Or at least take a look and see who else is involved. You can interview doctors, right? And I know it's hard to break up with a doctor or anybody in our lives, but at the end of the day, you're here for you and you're here to be empowered for yourself. I thank you so much, Pam. This has just been wonderful. And I know that we're helping people by them listening to this conversation. And that's it. So I would like to say thank you guys. Thank you all so much for listening and spending this valuable time with us. You guys be well. And I look forward to talking to you guys really soon. Thank you. And thanks again, Pam. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Kimberly. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, guys, take care. We'll talk to you soon.